What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Shop. Today we're going to talk about some World War III news. In fact, this is, I'm going to call this red alert, maximum level red alert World War III news. This is just unbelievable stuff that I've seen coming out of not necessarily our mainstream news. I've had to go to some other places to find this news because, you know, it's all one-sided over here. All the news media outlets over here, and a lot of them in the European states and stuff like that, they're all saying that, you know, Russia is defeated and Putin has made a fool of himself, and, you know, he's lost like 20,000 troops and a whole bunch of military tanks and generals and all this other stuff. And my argument, along with a lot of other people's argument, is that Putin has used a fraction of his military force because he was trying. He said openly he's trying to keep the civilian casualties down to a minimal. Early on, he said that. He said the goal was to denazify and demilitarize the Ukraine. And it's because of things that the United States, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Victoria Nuland, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, all these other people have done to the Ukraine to try to make them an agent against Russia. That's the whole point of it. The United States and these other groups, they wanted to get their guy in there, their puppet in there. So they got their rich oligarch buddies over in the Ukraine to fund this guy, Zelensky, his entire production company, all this. The guy's a multi-billionaire. I mean, how do you make multi-billions of dollars doing a comedy show? It's just not very likely. Our best comedians over here, our highest paid actors, don't have that kind of money sitting in offshore accounts like Zelensky does. So something is certainly dirty about that whole situation. And that they would bring in an actor, it's just like, I mean, it's sticking the thumb in the eye, man. I mean, it's just like, it's so blatantly obvious. And, you know, people will say, well, Ronald Reagan was an actor, blah, blah, blah. But it's a little bit different when you have a production company and you name your political party after that production company. It's just mind-blowingly on the surface. It's just, it's all right on the surface for everybody to find if you're willing to look for it. That shows you how little they care about people discovering their New World Order, one world government plan, is they're just doing it right out in the open now. And this kind of started happening, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, where they just stopped hiding the fact that they were socialist. Used to be socialist was a bad word in the United States. Now it's like, yeah, well, I'm a socialist, like Bernie Sanders, right? So anyways, I want to get into this news here before we go off on down too far of the rabbit hole. NATO conducted the largest war game exercise since the 1980s. And they just finished this up, I believe, last week. It involved 27 countries and it took place in Norway. So literally right across the border from Russia. I mean, do you think that's a smart idea? We know everything's hot right now. You know, Putin is doing all these moves in Ukraine, right? They're at war. Is it a smart idea for NATO, you know, who is kind of part of the reason, if not the majority, the main part of the reason that Russia is going into Ukraine right now? Is this smart for NATO to do this? Or could they have like maybe put this off for a while and done it later? I get it. They scheduled these things years out, but it just seems like not a very good idea to do this. And some might argue that it was NATO trying to basically show Putin that, hey, you know, we got a lot of power over here. We got a lot of force. Because I'm sure Putin, with his spies and his satellites and stuff like that, know exactly what took place over in Norway. It just doesn't seem like a smart idea to me. But what do I know? I'm not, you know, I'm not a diplomat or a world leader like, you know, Biden and his people are. So anyways, next story here. Russia's flagship destroyer has been sunk, and I can't remember the name. It was kind of like Moscow or Moskva or something like that. But it was an epically badass freaking battleship. Just looking at the pictures of it, I was like, man, that is a badass ship. Look at it. There's two different stories. Like a lot of this other stuff, in the fog of war, it's hard to tell what the truth is. So I'm going to tell you both sides of it. NATO and Ukraine are saying that they basically launched these 2 Neptune missiles and sank the ship. Of course, the interesting thing is, if that really did happen, that would be the first time in Ukraine history. And of course, I find this a little weird too. That boat was built in Ukraine back in the 70s. So it's a lot of very interesting things. And they're claiming that, you know, hey, yeah, victory, you know, we knocked it down with 2 Neptune missiles. And that could be true. But Russia is saying that it was a fire on board that was just like an accidental fire, and it caught some munitions on fire nearby, and it caused an explosion, a massive explosion, blew a frickin' giant hole in the side of the boat. They were trying to actually drag it back into near Russia where they could repair it. But supposedly, according to the Russians, the seas got, unruly, and the waves got too big, and it was going into the hole faster than they can pump it out, and the ship sank to the bottom of the Black Sea. So Zelensky he didn't really directly say it, but he kind of like made a little hint in his last speech that, that we're going to get these Russian ships out of here. Even if they have to go to the bottom of the Black Sea or whatever, that kind of a deal. So he acknowledged it in his last speech, but I don't think that was a smart move. I mean, he's not in a position of power. He's trying to pretend like he is. He thinks he's got NATO and the USA in his back pocket. But Zelensky ought to do a little bit of homework and research a little history and see how quickly NATO and the USA will turn their backs on someone if it suits them to do so. Yeah, I don't know. I wonder, why was that ship alone? Why was that ship out there all alone? That seems a little weird to me, to have a destroyer out there by itself. I mean, if that was the case, that's an arrogant move on the behalf of the Russian military to think that one ship would be able to do everything from that position. Usually it's an armada. Usually there's at least 4 or 5 other ships with them. And that's just in case that somebody fires some Neptune missiles at you, you can respond, right? I mean, it makes sense. So I don't know. There's something weird about this whole story. And I'm not saying it didn't happen. I saw it on the TV, in flames and all this stuff, just like you did. But I don't know. I'm certainly not believing the mainstream narrative on this. I think it's probably more likely that it was an onboard fire, and the Ukrainian people and their military is taking credit for that, because it builds morale throughout the units, throughout the ranks. When they think that, they have a victory like that, that's going to make them fight harder and just keep their spirits up. So this is not uncommon. This is very common in war, where, one side says one thing and the other side says a completely opposite thing. But, I'm wondering, I guess this is going to be the way we're going to tell what really happened. If Ukraine actually took this boat down with 2 Neptune missiles, I predict there will be swift and brutal payback. If that comes and happens, and maybe even a statement is made, then we'll know that, yeah, it was taken down by the Neptune missiles, because Putin is trying to save face here, right? So anyways, it's very difficult when you're trying to look through the fog of war. It's pretty bad. You got to have your anti-communist glasses on, or else you don't stand a chance. So the next story here: Russia formally tells the US and NATO to stop providing weapons to Ukraine. They say they will target NATO supply lines. They know where they're coming in, and they've been not targeting them so far, but they're telling Biden and NATO that, hey, look, we know you guys are bringing in mercenaries and weapons and supplying these people with weapons. Hell, you're doing it out in the open, so your mainstream media is echoing this stuff all throughout, right? They just said they're going to send over another $300 million worth of weapons last week. I mean, again, Zelensky has a blank check with the Biden administration, with NATO. So I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, maybe Biden should be helping, sending some of that money over instead of in weapons, in the form of humanitarian aid and crisis, people to help with, the Red Cross and things like that. I think that would be totally acceptable. But actually supplying Russia's enemy with weapons, I mean, how would we look at that? Let's say we were in the middle of a big war with some country, right? I mean, and some other country like Russia was supplying our enemy with all the weapons and mercenary troops and stuff like that. At a certain point, you're like, hey, I'm not going to fight this guy anymore. I'm going to fight you. You're the one that's doing all the stuff. So Biden is pulling us dangerously closer and closer and closer to the abyss of nuclear war, because that's how this ends, guys. I mean, why do you think they have all these nukes all over the place? It's not just to collect dust. They've got them to, I guess it was supposed to be a deterrent, but I guess all that depends on how you look at things. Again, Russia and Putin have said if they feel cornered, they will use nukes. And I'm kind of surprised they haven't used tactical nukes already. So we'll see, I guess. But, you know, that NATO supply line, it's vulnerable. Just like the supply line, or just like the big convoy of Russians coming down, you know, that big long convoy of all the tanks and military gear and stuff, that was vulnerable as well. Well, when you send weapons in and stuff like this, they know where it's coming in. Russia's got advanced satellites and other stuff. They know, and they've got spies and people around that are working for them. There are a whole lot of people in Ukraine that are pro-Russia, pro-Putin, believe it or not. They know what this is about. They don't believe Putin was lying when he said we need to denazify these certain regions here, because there are neo-Nazis there. That's why they're doing it. So this is proven stuff now. Now, the last story here, it's a biggie, and it has not been reported on nearly enough. This should have been on every freaking news channel, wall-to-wall coverage, because of the implications that come along with this. Allegedly, according to the video that I watched, and I'm gonna add the video in here in a minute. We'll discuss it a little bit more. But allegedly, the Russian troops found UAV drones. So the Russian forces came along and they find this whole pile of drones and stuff. And they claim that they were abandoned by Ukrainian soldiers. And these things aren't like little toys. These are highly sophisticated, probably provided by the United States of America or NATO drones. And what's so interesting about them is they have a liquid tank on them and sprayer nozzles. Look like 2 spray nozzles below each propeller. And you might be wondering, well, what would you use those for? Well, you could use those for dispersing biological or chemical weapons. That'd be the number one thing. So, I mean, they've been, you know, when I say they, the MSM has been saying that Russia is going to use biological or chemical weapons all along. And it's really starting to smell like the makings of a false flag to me. I mentioned it a couple of videos ago. I think this is it, guys. This is how they're going to do it, and they're going to blame it on the Russians. They're going to say, hey, look, the Russians are using biological weapons. And then they're going to say, well, I mean, that's a humanitarian crisis. We have to bring NATO in. And the NATO people will all be like, here, here, yes, yes, we have to go in now. You can't have people using biological and chemical weapons. So we draw the line there, right? Right? Can you see this playing out? Then NATO comes in. What do you think Russia's response is going to be to that? It probably will go nuclear at that point. So guys, we're in a hell of a lot of trouble. More trouble than I'm qualified to talk about, I'll admit it. This is just scary, scary stuff. Scary stuff. I mean, I can't tell you how to defend yourself against a mushroom cloud. I mean, I don't know. That's where my prepping skills are falling short. You know, there are ways, there are books you can get on how to, you know, protect yourself from like nuclear winters and things like that. But, you know, if it gets to that point, guys, I mean, this could be the end of life as we know it on the planet Earth. Everything. I mean, because if it's bad enough, all-out nuclear destruction, for one, it may not destroy the Earth, but it could certainly destroy life on Earth. And yeah, there will be some people like these super elites that have been digging their bunkers and preparing for all this, almost as if they knew it was coming. You know, it's predicted in the Bible that people will, you know, the rich and the elites will run into their caves and their holes and their rock. You know, they didn't know what to call them. They didn't have a name for bunkers back then, but they'll be going into their bunkers, you know, like Bill Gates and his super bunker. I mean, why do they need those, huh? Huh? Do they know something we don't know? I think they might, guys. So please, do what you can. Stock up now. None of this stuff is going to help anything with the economy or anything with the supply chain. It's all going to get worse from here. That's the only thing that can happen. The only thing you can do is try to build yourself a lifeboat. Go out and get some supplies. Make sure you've got plenty of firepower. Make sure you got plenty of ammo to put in that firepower. Make sure you've got some sandbags around in case you have to, like, you know, sandbag up your windows and stuff like that, or you have to, you know, dig yourself some foxholes and some good shooting positions right there on your property. Maybe you could design your garden in such a way where you have raised planters where you can get behind those boxes, and that would stop a bullet. I mean, we need to start thinking about red dawn in America, because the more this knucklehead, Dementia Joe, screws things up, the more likely it is that that's going to be a reality here in the United States of America. Please, guys, stock up now while you can. Get everything while you can before the dollar is totally worthless. And I'm afraid that's coming real fast. I mean, I can just see it. It's coming. They're trying to break the entire United States system. And to do that, they have to break the foundation, which is what Biden and Obama and Victoria Nuland and George Soros and Klaus Schwab and on and on and on have been trying to do since the start. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, on and on and on. I could just go on all night about that. But you guys, please, if you believe in prayer, pray for peace, because that's what we need. We need people that are diplomats to go over and cool this situation down. You don't go and pour gasoline on a fire and turn it into an inferno and act like you're the savior. You just don't get to do that. But that's what they're trying to do right now. Don't believe anything you see coming off the MSM. These are all true stories. And I told you both sides of every one of them. So please hit me up in the comments. We'll continue this discussion on. Tell me what you're doing to prepare for World War III, because if, like me, if you're still watching this video, you probably, like me, believe that this is coming sooner rather than later. And all we can do is prepare and, and pray. Pray. That's about all we can do. God bless you. God bless the United States of America for as long as it lasts. The country, not the government. I stand for liberty. I hope you do too.